And welcome to the New Mexico State Bar Foundation's Modest Means Helpline Small Business Webinar. My name is Margaret Lorenz, and I am one of 5 staff attorneys at the Modest Means Helpline. Also with me is Attorney Casey Daniel, the Managing Attorney for MMH, and the Legal Services Director for the State Bar Foundation. Attorney Casey Daniel will be our moderator during the webinar. If you have questions, please type those in the question and answer box, and I will address the questions as we move along. Also, if you have ideas for future presentation topics, please type those in the question and answer box. Before we can dive into the substance of this webinar, we must express a few important things. This presentation provides attendees and viewers with general legal information. Neither the Modest Means Helpline or myself is entering into any attorney-client relationship with any attendees or viewers of this webinar. The information is provided for purposes of providing examples only. The views and opinions expressed by myself do not necessarily reflect the views, policies, or positions of the New Mexico State Bar Foundation. The foundation does not endorse or assume any responsibility for the accuracy or completeness of the information presented. This webinar is a presentation of the Modest Means Helpline of the New Mexico State Bar Foundation. I am one of 5 staff attorneys of the Modest Means Helpline. The helpline is a civil legal telephone helpline and attorney referral service of the New Mexico State Bar Foundation. We assist New Mexico residents with incomes below 500% of the federal poverty guidelines. We can assist in civil legal matters, including but not limited to domestic relations, landlord-tenant, small business issues, consumer and probate. If appropriate, we may refer a case to volunteer attorneys for representation, ranging from pro bono legal advice to limited or full representation. Thank you for your attention to those important disclosures. Now we will begin the substance of the webinar. Why create an LLC? What are the advantages of doing this? And how do you do it? This is a lot of ground to cover. In thinking about the most efficient and impactful way to use the next hour exploring this topic, I've chosen to break it down into 3 subtopics. Honestly, each one could maybe be its own webinar. So the slide in front of you shows how I've chosen to allocate the time of the webinar. First, know that an LLC is not the only type of entity you can establish to run your business. There are corporations, limited partnerships, among other things. I've chosen to briefly explain why to create an LLC as opposed to a corporation, and then drill down more substantively on the LLC. Then the most time of the webinar will focus on how to create the LLC in New Mexico. I tell you this just to set expectations. For those of you who are really interested in knowing this step-by-step of how to do this online, that's coming. For those of you who want a more detailed drill down on the comparison of a corporation and an LLC, you will only get a taste of that. If you are operating a small business, a professional practice, a family business, a real estate holding business, or a startup that is not seeking outside investors, an LLC is usually the preferred entity, as opposed to a corporation. When compared to corporation creation and maintenance, an LLC is much simpler and has fewer legal formalities to follow. The LLC has no required annual meetings. Corporations are required by law to have annual meetings of the directors and shareholders. In New Mexico, the LLC has no required annual reports to the New Mexico Secretary of State. Corporations have required reporting to the New Mexico Secretary of State. The LLC has fewer legal record-keeping requirements. Corporations are required to have minutes and resolutions. The LLC has no mandatory board of directors. A corporation must have a board of directors and officers. The LLC is very flexible as to management. A corporation generally has stricter governance rules. So very simply, an LLC is often easier and cheaper to operate when compared to a corporation. The LLC also has more flexibility when it comes to tax choices. You see, an LLC can choose to be taxed as a corporation if that's better, or taxed as a partnership, or a pass-through if you're the sole owner of the LLC. Corporations are not flexible when it comes to taxes. Talk to your accountant in this arena. Tax reasons oftentimes drive the bus as to whether to be an LLC or a corporation. And a deep dive into tax, any dive into tax, is not what the Modest Means Helpline does. Both the LLC and the corporation offer liability protection, which we will talk about more in a minute. So there's not much difference there. LLCs are generally better when there are a few owners, the owners are all actively involved in the business, and outside investment is not a goal. Corporations are often better when there are many owners who may or may not be involved in the business, and it's seeking investment from outside investors. Corporations are more formal, standardized, and familiar to the world. So an LLC is generally thought to be more appropriate for smaller and private businesses because it offers tax flexibility, governance flexibility, and simplicity. A corporation is generally, though, thought to be more appropriate for businesses that are interested in scalability, investment raising, and following the formal tried and true structure of governance. Both are excellent methods of conducting businesses, actually. Today, though, we are focusing on why it's important to consider creating an LLC. If your business goals sound consistent with the LLC model, then you're in the right place. If I had to boil reasons to form an LLC down to a few main things, then I would say that primarily there are legal reasons, tax reasons to create an LLC. Secondarily, there are organizational reasons. Today, I will discuss in depth the legal reasons. I will touch on organizational reasons. However, with regard to the tax reasons, I must tell you to consult with your CPA or trusted tax lawyer to explore all of the tax consequences. Many times, your choice to become an LLC is affected by tax consequences. We will not discuss tax, and trust me, it's important to consider. Therefore, take what you can from this webinar on all the legal reasons, but don't forget to talk to your tax advisor for tax advice on why to create an LLC or not. The legal reasons to create an LLC involve shielding your personal stuff from being vulnerable to pay for business debts and liabilities. Recall that this liability shield also applies to the corporation context, but in our small business webinar, we are focusing on the LLC. Let's say you are the owner of a business that takes people up in planes to teach them how to parachute from the plane to the ground. Or let's say you are the owner of a business that takes people out on hunting expeditions. Or better yet, you take brand new hunters out on their first hunting expedition and you provide the guns and the ammo for this wonderful experience. These are hazardous occupations. It is pretty easy to see how someone could suffer personal injury and possibly death in the course of your business. It makes sense that someone owning and conducting this business would be concerned about liability. It is natural and it's expected for you to worry about that. If a customer gets hurt and claims you were negligent and sues you for billions of dollars, and if you lose that lawsuit and you're found liable, what does that mean regarding your family's house, your spouse's car, your personal bank account? Well, let's talk about other, less obvious hazards of business. Let's pretend you own a rental house and the house develops a dangerous condition, like the renter thinks about building a pond and digs a big hole in the backyard and then forgets about it. And then let's pretend a neighbor's child gets into the backyard and falls into that hole and gets hurt. You, as the owner of that house, will be sued. Here's another example. You own a business that has a brick and mortar building, and a guest falls in the hall, claiming there's an unevenness to the hall, or maybe there was something wet in the hall that should have been cleaned up. Again, you will be sued. Here's another example. You own a business that is completely 100% remote. You take orders on the internet, ship stuff out based on orders. Sounds pretty calm, uneventful. What's dangerous about that? Well, let's pretend you complete an order and the customer is not happy with the product. And the customer claims that you misrepresented things. The product was incorrect. And because of all of this, the customer's 1,000 person event was severely and negatively impacted. And the customer has suffered thousands of dollars worth of damages. Here's another. I'm going to end soon. Let's pretend you work from home and you're a 1099 worker and you enter all this data into a spreadsheet, or let's say you enter data directly into a computer system for a company. And let's pretend you finished the project, you've submitted the data or you've entered the data into the system, and for some reason the data was corrupt in the transmission and you didn't know it, and the data entered is wrong, and somehow this causes a complete failure of their important computer system. You have corrupted an entire system. The company suffers losses. I can dream up all sorts of worst case scenarios where a business could get sued. Usually, if you tell me a function that is performed, I can think of a legal predicament and liability. That is just the nature of the beast. So what do you do to protect yourself from such business liabilities? You know to have insurance. A business will have insurance over things, but I'm here to tell you, you should also consider creating an LLC through which to do business. The law allows you to create this separate person, a non-natural person, to conduct business through. You can elect to become a corporation or a limited liability company. This is just about LLCs, of course. By statute, by state law, a person is allowed to create a separate person through which business can be conducted. And this person should take the beating if there's ever a lawsuit against the business. Your personal stuff should not take the beating. It should be safe, secure, and unbothered. And so the big legal reason that people create an LLC is because of the limited personal liability that flows from this arrangement. Owners are called members, and generally speaking, not liable for business debts or lawsuits. And so your personal assets, your home, your car, your personal bank account is protected, safe, secure, unbothered if the business is sued. This separate legal entity enters into its own contracts, sues, and can be sued in its name, and can own property in its separate name. Again, just have to say it, there are huge tax benefits that can flow too, but that's beyond the scope of this webinar. There is another item that is beyond the scope of this webinar, and it's something that is relatively moot at this time, but it bears mentioning. The federal government, specifically the U.S. Department of Treasury Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, otherwise known as FinCEN, has toyed with the idea for a few years of having all registered entities like LLCs, corporations, and such file what's called a Beneficial Ownership Information Report, BOI report, with the feds. There was a time when if you created an LLC or anything else that had to register with the New Mexico Secretary of State, that you also had to register with the feds. Right now, as of the date of this webinar, May the 20th, 2026, all U.S. domestic reporting companies and their beneficial owners are now exempt from BOI reporting requirements. However, foreign reporting companies, that would be like a non-U.S. entity registered to do business in the U.S., must register with the feds. I mention this because this webinar is not going into this, but you should always keep your ear to the ground and know what is required on the local, state, and federal level regarding your entity. This registration with the feds was all done to stop money laundering and terrorism. If you were supposed to register and you didn't, you faced huge fines and possible time in prison. We did a webinar on this when we all thought this was going to apply to us, but now it doesn't. So again, you got to keep your ears to the ground. Now back to the legal benefits or legal reasons to create an LLC. I've already talked about protecting your personal assets and stuff by doing this. I believe that another benefit of operating a business through an LLC is that it makes the business appear more legitimate, more professional, more organized. Some vendors will not deal with you unless you are organized as an LLC or a corporation. In New Mexico, an LLC is a streamlined and efficient method of conducting business. In theory, there is less paperwork involved overall, and there is no annual filing fee, and fewer governance requirements owed to the state of New Mexico. By operating your business through an LLC, there are strong privacy protections. You can use a registered agent, which we will discuss, their address instead of listing your home address as an example. By operating your business through an LLC, there are mechanisms in the law that with appropriate preparation will allow your LLC to continue with trusted individuals even after you die or decide to retire. By operating your business through an LLC, you can form multiple LLCs to isolate risk. This may help prevent liabilities in one venture from affecting others. By operating through an LLC, you are opting into a frame or structure of business that gives the business organization. The business model is set out for you in the statutes, New Mexico state law, and you simply adopt it and prepare documents accordingly. Speaking of the New Mexico statutes, remember the whole reason you can create an LLC is because the statutes allow this. The statutes also define very important aspects of an LLC. So now it's time for some basic terminology straight out of the New Mexico statutes. LLCs have members. What's a member? A member is a person who has an ownership interest in the LLC. Like a shareholder who owns a share of stock in a corporation, a member is an owner of an interest, usually a definite percentage of an interest in the LLC. The statutes describe that an LLC is either member managed or manager managed. If an LLC is member managed, then each and every member owner has management authority. If an LLC is manager managed, then the members have delegated management authority to someone or a group of people. The manager or managers are generally responsible for the day-to-day management and operation of the LLC. When compared to corporate structure, which we are all somewhat familiar with, again, the manager or managers are like the board of directors and officers all rolled into one. The details of the protocols for the business operation, when there's more than one member especially, are spelled out in an operating agreement. An operating agreement in an LLC is kind of like the bylaws of a corporation. Operating agreements answer questions like this, like who manages the LLC? Who has what decision-making authority? An operating agreement will tell you what vote a member has. And does the vote of a member to make something happen have to be unanimous or majority? And the same sort of question if you have managers. What vote is required for a capital call if the LLC needs money? How can that happen? What vote is required for the LLC to get a loan? What happens when a member dies? That's all spelled out in this operating agreement. So the operating agreement, like I said, it's kind of like the bylaws of a corporation, which is a familiar frame of reference for many. It's super important, especially when there is more than one member. If you are creating an LLC with more than one member, more than just you, get to an attorney to get an operating agreement hammered out. In my opinion, all members at the time of creation of the LLC need to sign the operating agreement, indicating they agree with the protocols and management structure. Side note, you will see that the state of New Mexico, upon creation of the LLC, doesn't ask you if you've created an operating agreement. The state doesn't care if you've created an operating agreement. And guess what? If you don't have one, the New Mexico statutes have one for you. If you forget that part or don't do it, the state has an operating agreement all set out for you in the statutes. And guess what? It's probably not what you really want. But your rights, duties, and responsibilities are spelled out when there is conflict, especially. So, if there is more than one member of an LLC, the LLC business structure demands an operating agreement, in my opinion. The operating agreement is not asked for when you create this LLC, so beware. We will talk more about this in a few slides. As far as a single member LLC goes, well, that is you. You're in charge. You can dictate protocols so long as they don't run afoul of statutes. So please understand that I'm going to show you how to do this very easy online process to make your LLC come alive. However, whether that LLC has a chance at living a good, long life, if there's more than one member, will very much depend on its operating agreement. A single member LLC should also have a written operating agreement, but it basically puts the single member in charge of everything. And so, for purposes of this webinar, and as I proceed, I'm presuming you are creating a single member LLC. That means you and only you are the owner. What I show you can absolutely be used to create a multi-member LLC, but I firmly believe you need an attorney's help in creating that because you need a good operating agreement. Before I dig deeper into the how to form an LLC in New Mexico, I need to note that the biggest reason to create an LLC is to avoid personal liability for business actions. What I'm showing you now is how easy it is to do this, how to set this up. If you want to understand how personal liability could attach to you, even though you have an LLC, and I've done these easy steps, please consider viewing a webinar that we conducted back a year ago, February 5th, 2025, entitled 2025 New Year's Resolution, Promoting the Legal Fitness and Health of Your Small Business, Best Practices to Protect Yourself from Undue Personal Liability. That webinar is available at sbnm.org, For Public, Modest Means Helpline, MMH Publications, and you scroll down to it. That is actually where all of our prior webinars and this webinar are housed, and where this one will be housed. Now back to starting the LLC. We reviewed the legal reasons and benefits for doing this. I've cautioned you that the organizational document and filing that I'm going to show you today ought to not be the only document you create upon establishment of an LLC. You should create an operating agreement. Importantly, too, I've cautioned you to talk to your CPA or trusted tax lawyer to make sure you have considered all of the tax advantages or disadvantages. Finally, I've mentioned that there are other types of business entities available to operate a business other than an LLC, but we will not be discussing those today. We are not at the Modest Means Helpline recommending that you form an LLC to operate your business. This is a decision you must make for yourself after learning as much as you can about it. This webinar is an important piece of that process. If you decide to plow ahead and jump into operating as an LLC, the analysis and how to do it is 100% driven by New Mexico state law. It's in our statutes. If you operate in New Mexico and another state in the union, I recommend you talk to a corporate attorney. This webinar presumes that you operate wholly within New Mexico. And like I said, for purposes of our example and discussion, this is a single member LLC we're talking about from here on out. All of the creation starts at the New Mexico Secretary of State and its website, which has a web address of sos.nm.gov. You see, the New Mexico Secretary of State is in charge of registering LLCs and other businesses in New Mexico. If you do what is required and file with the New Mexico Secretary of State, the Secretary of State will issue a birth certificate of sorts called a Certificate of Organization and Articles of Organization Your LLC will be an official person in the eyes of the law of the state of New Mexico. Before you start doing anything, though, at this website, there are important things to know and be prepared for. The name. The name of your LLC must be unique and cannot be claimed by any other LLC or entity in the state of New Mexico. Specifically, the name shall be distinguishable from the name of any other LLC, limited partnership, corporation now existing in New Mexico. For a limited liability company to be created, its name must have the words limited liability company or LLC in it. Just like when you have a child and you are pondering the choice of a name for your child, this name choosing for your LLC should be just as deliberate. I don't recommend long names. I recommend concise names. You will have this name on your letterhead, on your email address, probably write it many times. Because of all this use, short and concise is best if possible. A company called Best and Most Efficient Worldwide Sidewall Contractor LLC is a ton. I once helped 4 gentlemen set up an LLC and they all wanted their names in that LLC, and no, this was not a law firm. With what they were doing, having such a name would have been very cumbersome. Similarly, if you were to choose the name Satan LLC, you will be absolutely alienating people with the name. Choose your name carefully. Then you have to check and see if the name is available at the Secretary of State. And let me show you how to do that. Going back to the sos.nm.gov homepage, and you're going to click on Online Services. And then a new page will pop up. You're going to click on Business Services Online Filings Portal. Welcome to the online portal, it says. You are going to scroll down, and in the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see where it says Business Filing Help and Resources. You are going to click on Public Business Search. And then this screen pops up. Let's pretend I want to name my company Central Avenue LLC. I type that in, and then I hit the magnifying glass. All the names that have Central Avenue in it or names that are close to Central Avenue come up, and there's a lot. Look at how many. You will look at each and every one of them and determine if the name you are choosing is too similar or identical to an active LLC. It's also interesting to note, and I've had this happen a few times, you pull up this company name that you're thinking about, and some of the other names that pull up as identical or similar, you're like, wait a minute, I don't even want to remotely be confused with that company. So they'll go in a whole different direction with name, and that can happen. You can see that Central Avenue LLC once was a company, but it is now dissolved. So it is okay to use that name. Once you settle on a name, you are ready to proceed to the next step. But let me give you another hint. If you go back to the main page, click on Online Services, click on Business Services Online Filings Portal. Then you're going to go down to Business Filing Help and Resources. Business Online Filing Help. Here it is blown up for you. Business Online Filing Help. Click on that. This page has guides. This Business Online Filing Help file, you can open file. It's an 11-page document that goes through some of what we're talking about today. Not as much as what we're talking about today, but some. And I think it's sort of helpful. You might want to have that printed out and look at that as a reminder too. Okay. Now we're going to go back to the job of creating the LLC. The next big pre-application point is that there are fees and forms required. You will need to print out a form, have your registered agent sign it, scan it into your computer system for later uploading. You need to do this first before you start the online LLC process. So let's talk about the registered agent and who the heck is that? I've told you about how this process of creating an LLC is rather magical. You are literally creating a new person under the eyes of the law, and that person is not seen, not felt, not heard, not smelt for that matter. It is a total inanimate being. We call that a non-natural person. However, in order to create this non-natural person, the Secretary of State needs to know who, within the boundary lines of the state of New Mexico, will receive service of process if the LLC is ever sued, and who will receive other important Secretary of State correspondence. That person is called a registered agent. Your LLC cannot be created unless a valid registered agent is identified at creation. The New Mexico statutes dictate the requirements of your registered agent. And again, it must be an individual who is in and resides in the state of New Mexico. It could be a New Mexico company. It could be a foreign entity that is registered or authorized to do business in the state. So it's pretty flexible regarding who can be designated. But you see that registered agent must be connected to New Mexico. You cannot, as an example, name your brother Sam, who lives in Delaware, as your registered agent. That's not going to fly. Additionally, the registered agent must have a physical address in the state. This is, quote, the person who is to receive the service of process if the LLC is sued. So the sheriff deputy has to have a physical place to deliver the process. No P.O. boxes allowed. Once you've chosen your registered agent and you get their agreement, here's where you get the form that you must have ready to go when you create the LLC online. Oh, and as a side note, in our scenario where I'm creating a sole member LLC, it is perfectly fine for you, the real live natural person, to be your own registered agent. You will see that I'm doing that as I go along. That does not expose you to any different liability. It's very common. So, to get this form that you're going to need to have completed and in the system before you do your online filing, go back to the main page again. You will again go to Online Services, and again click on Business Services Online Filings Portal. Scroll down, down, down to Business Filing Help and Resources. Here's a blow up of that. You're going to click on Registered Agent Form Available, and this form pops up. Let's look at this. It's called Statement of Acceptance of Appointment as Registered Agent. You will complete the name of the business. This is the new business with the limited liability company in it or LLC. This is your new name, okay? And if your registered agent is a natural person, you will check the first box. If it's not a natural person, it's a corporation or something, you're going to click the second box. Then the person who's designated as the registered agent has to date, sign, and print the name. Then you're going to scan this into the computer. In my single member LLC world, again, you will likely be your own registered agent, and that's okay. You'll click in my individual capacity, and then you'll date, sign, and print the form. The registered agent name is published on the website. So again, you're going to print this, complete it, sign it, scan it in, have it available when it's time. One final pre-application item, and I promise we're getting to it in just a few, but this is a little tricky. This involves an operational management analysis. We need to talk about management of an LLC. We've already talked about the basic terminology that says a member of an LLC is like the owner of a share of stock in a corporation. So just like you own a share of stock in Microsoft, you can own a share in an LLC. You'd be a member of the LLC. But just because you own a share of stock in Microsoft, or in our situation, a member of an LLC, it doesn't mean you're the manager of a Microsoft. Well, it could be the exact opposite in the LLC world. In other words, if you are a member of an LLC, unless the LLC takes certain steps, the law says the member is also automatically a manager. So let's drill down on this. In LLC world, the law classifies two types of management structures, basically two. There is a type of structure where each and every member owner is a manager. That's called member managed. And then there's a second type of structure where members delegate management authority to a selected member or members. Those selected member or member are managers. That's called a manager managed entity. And sometimes in the manager managed entity, it could be a non-member that's delegated by members as a manager. Our example today is of a single member LLC. And so by virtue of the fact that there's only one member, that member will be the manager by default because you've got to have a manager. Now that single member may decide to hire an outside manager who's not an owner, but that's fine. It's still a member managed entity because I'm singularly and solely in charge. As you can imagine, when there's more than one member of an LLC, the management structure and daily operation process needs to be carefully thought through before creation. There are many times when I created LLCs for, say, a husband and wife, and they were 50-50 owners, and they were both going to be managers. So that was easy peasy, member managed. It wasn't as easy when you had a group of 5 individuals coming together to make an LLC, and one wanted to be silent, not really participate in management, while the other 4 all wanted to be co-managers. In that scenario, because of the one, it was easy for me to see we were going to likely be setting up a manager-managed entity because the one member didn't want to participate in management. And the difficulties that we worked through involved how to have 4 Indian chiefs, and what did that look like? All of those details were spelled out in the operating agreement. You're going to see a prompt on the New Mexico Secretary of State website when we create this entity. The prompt will ask you if this is manager managed or member managed. So now at least you're going to have a frame of reference as to what they're talking about. Big caution. Under the New Mexico statutes, if you don't answer the prompt or you don't have an operating agreement, your LLC will become, by default, a member-managed entity. Each and every member is deemed a manager. I talk to lots of people on the helpline who have multi-member LLCs and no operating agreement. When you create an LLC and don't create an operating agreement and don't check certain boxes at the time of creation of your articles, the New Mexico statutes say that the LLC is member managed. That may not be what you want. The prompts at the creation phase can supersede that presumption if you choose to answer that prompt, but it's totally optional. You'll see in a minute. So in other words, unless you've totally thought this through, you could set yourself up for something you do not intend, especially if you think you're going to be the manager of a multi-member entity and don't get an operating agreement completed or do not complete the articles, this process we're going to go through in a second at the Secretary of State correctly. You'll see what I mean. Now we really are ready to do this thing, so let's go for it. We go back to the Secretary of State homepage. You are super familiar with this by now. You know I'm going to click on Online Services. You know I'm going to click on Business Services Online Filings Portal. Welcome to the online portal. You're going to scroll down. You're going to scroll down to Business Filing Help and Resources. And you're going to go down here underneath the little lock where it says Register a Business. Oh, this page opens up. This has tons of icons. And when you look at it carefully, here is every type of entity that the New Mexico Secretary of State allows you to do and create. We're up here in this corner. We're domestic LLC articles of organization, but it's interesting. You can see a regular domestic for-profit, domestic nonprofit, partnership, all this. Now down here in the bottom left, you see application for name reservation. That's an interesting thing. If you've really struggled and finally come upon a name and you want to reserve it, you can pay to apply to reserve it for like 120 days until you're ready to file articles. So that's interesting. So anyway, we're going to click the upper left-hand corner where it says Domestic LLC Articles of an Organization, and then this pop-up happens. It says, hey, proceeding, you're at the end, there's a non-refundable fee paid. Okay. Click File Online. Then you're going to be prompted to create an account if you don't have one. I had one, so it sort of kind of looks like this. I redacted for privacy, but you'll create your account. You're going to then log in once it's set up. Click on Login. Then you're in. This is the first page of the process. You can follow along in the process of creating in this blue band that shows up on the left-hand side. This is really, I think the Secretary of State did a good job with this. As you move along in all the prompts, this banner always remains. And if you've completed things correctly, there's a big like green check. If there's something you haven't done, it's a big red X. So you know you have to go back to it. And you can go back and forth without having to resave. So it's really, really good. So the first screen here is where you declare what type of business type that you are creating, okay? So you're going to get into this area and you're going to want to scroll down to Domestic LLC, and you're going to click on that. Then it asks you here, have you previously filed to reserve a name that will be used for this filing? I have not, so I said no. Then you're going to scroll down more, and it's going to ask you, what is the limited liability company's name? And you can see I forgot the L. So it really wants you to be exact with this name, super important. So it told me in red that I messed up. So I fixed it and moved on. Down below, it talks about consent to use name. This is a little weird, but it's here. I didn't get the consent of anybody to use the name Central Avenue LLC because I didn't think I needed it, because when I looked at things looked good. Like there wasn't anything too similar that was going to get in my way. Now, if you really were set on a name and someone else was using it, or you thought it might be too similar, you could approach that company and ask for consent to use the name. It would be really hard for me to imagine a company giving someone consent because they don't want themselves confused with something else, but I suppose it's possible. If you did obtain consent, you would check the second box below. What I checked is, it is not known if consent to use the name is needed from a business registered in New Mexico, because that's me saying, look, I've looked and I'm good. So Secretary of State, now I'm going to kick it to you. You're going to take a look and let me know. I don't think so, but let me know. So there was one scenario I thought about, though, that where it might be appropriate. Say you had a company, let's pretend it's called White Lotus 1, and you want to create another company called White Lotus 1.1. Well, that's really, really, really similar. So you're like, yeah, but that's my plan. I want to have 1.1 or 1.2. I want to go. So you could write a little very self-serving consent, and then the Secretary of State would know it would be okay. That was one example. So am I gonna, and then the last prompt on this page is the name proposed to do business in New Mexico different than the registered LLC name? I said no. This is if you're gonna have a DBA name, this is where you would disclose that. I'm not gonna do that. A practice tip, I think it is much cleaner, and I think it's much more protective to do business in your full LLC name. That's another reason why the name needs to be concise and really deliberately chosen. So that's everything on this first page. Then you hit next step. It's asking for the business address and contact information. So you have to complete, does this business have a principal place of business? Complete at least what is in the asterisk shown. Then it asks you about the business mailing address. If that's different, you complete that. You put in phone number and email address. Next step. Now it's asking about your registered agent. Now, In this section, you're going to tell the registered agent and its address. My registered agent is a natural person, so I hit the plus add new agent. If I was doing some company or something, I might do here, and then they can search for that throughout the system, but I'm not. I'm adding this person, so I hit add new agent. And then this little pop-up happens. You've got to complete the boxes that are at least asterisk. And again, this is your registered agent's name and address. Notice physical address, physical. Now, as you go down, you will also complete the mailing address for them if it is different than the physical. And then you'll hit save. And then it's going to summarize for you. This is all fictional. These addresses are not real. That is not a real computer. It's not a real email address. But anyway, this is going to summarize that. So you want to make sure that looks right. Okay. So what you inputted in total is shown. And then you're going to scroll down and you're going to certify that the information is correct. And this is where you're going to upload that form we went over earlier, the one that the registered agent has signed indicating their consent to be your registered agent. You're going to upload that here. Select the file, upload it, the acceptance form, and then you're going to hit next step. Then you have this duration and purpose screen. So you're like, oh, this is interesting. Do you want your company to last forever and ever? Or do you want to have it automatically die on a certain date? Most of the time people say perpetual. You can, of course, dissolve it by filing articles of dissolution and following all of that procedure. But most of the time you're saying perpetual. It's hard to imagine how you might want something to be automatically dying by some future date, but in the past that was a thing. Now, then it wants to know your purpose. It is best not to be too specific. You want to be broad. A common purpose statement, the LLC may conduct or promote any lawful business or purpose. And there you leave it open for whatever this LLC might want to do. Then you hit the next step. You will see the statement of management status. Woo, we talked about this, right? This article is optional. You might look at this and say, I don't understand what they're talking about, and totally skip over it. But now you know what they're talking about. But technically, you do not need to disclose this information. It is up to you. Number one, limited liability company is managed or under the authority of a manager. Okay, you know what that means, manager managed. Number two, the limited liability company may carry on its business and affairs as a single member limited liability company. That's me. That's what I'm doing here today. Number three, I would like to include my members of the limited liability company. If you click on this one, then it's going to ask you to list all of the members' names. If you click on this one up here, the manager one is going to ask you to list the manager's names. And those do become public knowledge. They do get published on the Secretary of State website. So it's up to you. If you want to be super, super, super private and anonymous, you're not going to be putting in names of members. You're not going to be putting in names of managers. It's up to you. Pros and cons. Okay. Now, what I did for this example is I said, well, I'm creating a single member. That's what I'm doing. That's all I'm going to, that's what I wrote. And here, the next section talks about whether or not you have additional articles or provisions to your articles. Remember, you're completing articles of creation, articles of organization. Whether you want to add something to this will depend on your business plan and goals. If an attorney is helping you create this LLC, your attorney may have some additional paragraphs that may be useful to add to the filing. An attorney looking at your specific situation would be best to advise. There could be special language that an attorney would recommend, but that's beyond the scope of this webinar. In the plain vanilla single member LLC world that I'm living in right now, I am comfortable stating there are no additional articles that I want to add. You're going to scroll down more, and it's going to ask you when this thing is going to be born. When do you want it to become a real person? And I said when filed. Okay. Then I'm going to click next step. Time to pay. They're going to walk you through certain disclosures. You're going to hit next step here. And once you do, and I didn't do it because it's too much, it's all your answers, all of them. You scroll down, 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 you check everything over, make sure it's all perfect, read it carefully. You'll be told if anything is wrong, it'll be in big red. If there are errors, you can go back and fix. So look at it really carefully. Then you're going to get to, once it's correct, you're going to hit file, you're going to hit next, and this is going to pop up. These attestations, which you're going to want to read. And then it's going to ask you about who's the organizer, like who's the person putting all this in the computer right now. And you actually have to disclose that. This is the person completing the filing online. It's likely you if you're the single member LLC, not necessarily, but could be the attorney doing it for you. It just depends. And when you click on the little thing, see down here where it says organizer and you have to add the name, you're going to click on add, and this is what's going to pop up. So this is the organizer's name. So I would have just reiterated my name, basically. Do what is asterisk, hit the save. Again, here's a reiteration. I said, okay, 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 and here I am, an organizer. And then I click file online. And now everything is good. You're going to be prompted to sign and money is collected. File online. Once submitted, your application will be evaluated. You will only receive an email from the New Mexico Secretary of State office after they review it. Make sure your name is not too similar. Make sure you've got a physical address for a registered agent in the state of New Mexico and all that good stuff. Then they will write you back on an email to tell you whether your application is approved, rejected, or requires corrections. Ultimately, what you're after is a filed certificate of organization that has attached to it filed articles of organization for your LLC. That is proof that your LLC is alive and can work. If you receive an email notification that your filing needs correction, you have 90 days to fix it. If not, that application will be automatically rejected. And if you do anything new, you'd have to pay another bit of money. You can track the progress of your filing by logging into your account and checking My Business Work Queue. So, interesting but true. Again, they didn't ask me for an operating agreement, and I've told you how important that is, right? The statutes will give you an operating agreement, likely not what you want, but it's a thing. So, and at this point in time, May 20th, 2026, once you've created this LLC, you have no further reporting requirements to the Secretary of State. However, if you need to change registered agents, then you would do a filing for that. But there's no other mandatory reporting like there is in corporate world. So you're going to get those articles back and you're going to create a 3-ring binder that will be your company book. You will put your articles in there. You will keep your operating agreement in there. All decisions, company organization papers, and important documents will go in that notebook. You will need to update accounts and contracts after formation. There is information to be given to your taxation and revenue. There is information you want to give to insurance companies because they're going to want to change the name to the LLC. Your contracts and leases all need to reflect your name, business license as well. Maintaining the LLC is super important. Was part of what I just talked about all that updating stuff is all discussed in this webinar that we did back in February of 2025. So I'd encourage you to take a look if you haven't already seen that. So at this point, that is all, and appreciate you hanging in there through this webinar and hope it was helpful. Are there any questions? Probably not. You're on mute. Yep.
Thank you. We don't have any questions listed right now.
Okay, great.
I did want to just note, when you say that there's no annual filings or there's no other filings they have to do with the Secretary of State's office, they do, though, as you said, there are tax filings, and you're not okay if you don't do that. So that part is not covered here, but
Right.
yeah, definitely got to do that.
It's a pain in the neck, yeah. But it's
Well,
all good.
If nobody has other questions, and nobody seems to have questions, hope this was helpful for everyone. And
Yay.
thank you for your attending.